Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me. Welcome to StartCon. Yeah, it's really great to be here. It's my first time in Sydney and first time in Australia, and got a chance to go out to Manly yesterday and do some surfing. It's really, really an amazing place. I really have been enjoying my time. So I want to thank Lana and Darren and the folks from StartCon for what looks to be a great conference, and really excited to be kicking this off. Also, would love to thank Matt and Sarah from Freelancer. One quick story, I met Matt today, actually last night for the first time, but he saved me about 10 years ago. I had launched a company called Victors and Spoils, and Victors and Spoils was an ad agency based on crowdsourcing principles. It was before its time, 2009, and a lot of people in the ad business really hated me, this idea of having people work on projects from around the world. And I was in the middle of a conference speaking in San Francisco, but it was being televised or I guess simulcast here in Sydney. And one of the people from the audience was really after me about this whole idea of open talent. And so Matt came to my rescue and actually explained to the audience in San Francisco how important that was and what the future was going to be. So thanks, Matt. I'm really glad to be here with you guys. So today I want to talk about surviving avalanches, finding your passion in the midst of disruption. I think all of us as entrepreneurs and startup folks have to deal with some disruption, and I've been thinking about that a lot over the last couple of years. I love to ski, I love to surf, I'm really passionate about it. But imagine this, being on a trip in Canada, near Rogers Pass with an expert group of folks. There were 14 of us, professional guides, folks from the industry. I was on the board of Black Diamond Equipment for a long time. So we were skiing a new route, a bunch of big couloirs on this peak called Cupola Peak. Really fun, but really scary. So we did everything right. We had the right team. We had the right equipment, we did the right testing, we looked at kind of how the avalanche or an avalanche might happen, did a thing called a Rausch block test, did everything right. We had two people that stood on top of a cliff about 50 feet above the couloir to check out to make sure everything was going to be okay. The 12th skier, Kim Miller, who's now the president of Scarpa, was skiing into the couloir and there was a crack. The crack started to happen. The crack kind of came across, and right between myself and my oldest friend, Bruce, it happened, about 70 centimeters. I grabbed Bruce and I said, let's ride this out. Unfortunately, that fracture was a sympathetic fracture, and a fracture above the cliff band, fractured 9 feet deep and 1,000 feet across. It took the two people off the cliff, tumbled the rest of us down this couloir and set of cliffs, over another 50-foot cliff, about 1,000 feet, and we ended up on this big debris pile, about 75 feet deep. There were two full burials. Fortunately, we had the knowledge and the skill as a team to be able to dig those folks out. The point of the story is no matter in life, right, personally or professionally, you're going to have the best team and the best ideas as entrepreneurs, but you're still going to be disrupted. Now, I think that's a great example of physical disruption, but there's also emotional disruption. So here's the avalanche. This is Bridget. Amazing woman. I love her to death, or I loved her to death. She was my partner in many of these adventures. I had sold my last company, and I was chief innovation officer of a company called Havas, which I'll talk about in a bit. And we moved to Mexico. We built a school in this small village, which we'd had for a long time, this house for a long time. And she got really sick. She got depressed. It turned out she had bipolar. So for the next 3 years, we went on this crazy journey of 8 facilities and some suicide attempts. And 2.5 years ago, she took her life. I'd never experienced any mental illness or any kind of thing like bipolar, nor had I experienced anything like suicide, nobody close to me. So a real tragedy, just really a gut punch, right? Just everything shaken. So these disruptions can happen just so viscerally, like why am I here, what am I supposed to do, what's the passion that I need to follow, how do I go on? These disruptions just destroy everything in your life. What do you do? But what I've learned is, at the darkest moment comes the light. I've been pretty transparent about the journey that Bridget and I had with the community in Boulder. And out of that, we were able to raise the money to build a 77,000 square feet mental health hospital in Boulder that's state of the art. So I'm really proud of the community, and I've really been inspired by being transparent. Brad Feld is an investor in Boulder who's been as transparent in a lot of his writing about his depression, and it really helped. My hope is that other people will be helped out of this. I'm also really inspired because I just got married again to a friend from 25 years. So it really shows that no matter what happens in life, you can move on, you can move forward, right? But these disruptions happen in business as well. Who started a business in the room? Lots of folks. Yeah, lots of folks. I started a company called Victors and Spoils. It was an ad agency based on crowdsourcing principles, the one that Matt helped me deal with at the beginning. And it was about power to the brand and power to the people. The idea we were going to curate a small group of folks, have curators in office, but have the world to pull from for talent. We were really fortunate, and the New York Times wrote an article about us the day we launched. And that night, we went from my garage to about 1,000 people in the community, and Dish Network out of Denver gave us $4 million worth of advertising. So we went from 0 to on the board right away. About 18 months in, a guy by the name of David Jones, who was the CEO of Havas, told me, hey, instead of throwing rocks at the glass houses of the incumbent organizations or the holding companies, why don't you come in here and help me fix one? So I sold Victors and Spoils and became Chief Innovation Officer at Havas. This was at the time that Bridget was through her struggles, and one of the things that I love about being an entrepreneur is that kind of, epicness, right? The being on the edge, being scared, determining everything on your own, and really being fueled by passion every day, not knowing which way to go. But what I found in Havas is that it was really a passion desert, right? Between meetings and bureaucracy and just the risk adversity, it just sucked the life out of me. It was really, really difficult. I was in the midst of a passion crisis. And I think many companies today are in that midst, right? So many of my friends who work in this area of future of work have quit companies or decided no longer to be in that field because they've just gotten dragged down by this passion desert inside the big companies, whether it's Microsoft or GE or many others. So as I've tried to recover personally and thought a lot about, how do you get beyond these things, like, the passion desert at Havas, I've really found 4 steps that seem to really work well in trying to figure out how to go forward. I'd like to go through those with you guys. So the first step is learn. And when I think about these steps, one of the things I've found in this journey is you've got to be where you are. I know as entrepreneurs, we tend to say, okay, I've learned something and I'm going to jump into kind of the next phase and I'm going to get it going and I'm going to get funded and it's going to be rocking, right? But what I've learned in this last few years is it's just important when you're in the learn phase just to sit and be in the learn phase. One of the things I was really, really fortunate about through the Havas experience is that Harvard Business School did a couple case studies on me. And not only the building of Victors and Spoils, but also on Havas and can they change. Unfortunately, Havas just couldn't change. David Jones and I came up with a plan to create an internal crowd at Havas. The idea, my question was, can't we, use a digital tool to empower 20,000 employees, right, to put those creatives against our clients? Wouldn't it be great if we could take, instead of 5 creative teams, 20,000 people? Wouldn't a client like Peugeot be really excited? Peugeot was really excited, the C-level was really excited, but the mid-level managers were really, really scared and killed the project. So I've been playing around with the guys at the Laboratory of Innovation Sciences at Harvard for a bit now, for the last couple of years. Kareem Lakhani set up the lab, and he's the foremost authority in open innovation and future of work. Lish was built out of the NASA tournament lab. So I think somebody's speaking later about NASA, and my sense is that they really have this future of work dialed with their Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation. So I'm really excited to hear her talk. So one of my favorite case studies that we've come up with lately is a case study with Harvard Medical School. And one of the challenges is in lung cancer is to actually mark up the tumor, right, inside a lung. Like, how do you mark up a tumor in cells that is accurate enough so you don't cut into the important tissue or the well tissue, but cut all the cancer out? So the best folks in the world could do this pretty well, but it was really slow, and there's a big backlog of that expertise. So the idea was to build an AI, use a crowd to do that, and see what happened. It was a very successful project. It was written up in JAMA recently, and essentially the results were 18 minutes for a radiologist to accomplish that task, to mark up these CAT scans. Now an algorithm can do that in 5 seconds. But there's also an increase of accuracy of 12%. So pretty amazing use of crowds and really smart people to teach machines how to do something that's really, really important for the survival of folks. We've also been doing a lot of studies with NASA looking at the longitudinally, how do projects work over the last 4 years? Are they better? Are they faster? Are they cheaper? And what we've found over 314 projects is that 94% of projects participants said their results were successful, 74% of the solutions were implemented, and $24 million were of cost savings. One of the things I've really struggled about, when I started in the kind of open innovation space was in 2002, and back then we used to call it co-creation. I wrote a book. I wanted to call the book Co-Creation, but my publisher said, "Oh, that'll never happen. People will never want to participate in the creation of innovation." So the name of the book that the publisher came up with was Beyond the Brand. But back then, working with Jeff Howe on crowdsourcing in 2006 when he wrote the article and then the book, it was just a nascent idea. And soon after that, especially in the advertising business, crowdsourcing became a really dirty name, right? It just was low level and exploitive. Unfortunately, the word gig economy, that's happened lately too. And especially there's a law in California called AB 5 that has really been controversial and kind of protects workers' rights. There's some really good things about it, but it's going to restrict the access to some of the future of work tools that I think are important. But I was really fascinated by this idea between gig and passion. And Lee Jin from Andreessen Horowitz really opened my eyes to this. She wrote an article in their blog a couple months ago about this idea that maybe it shouldn't be called gig economy. Maybe it should be called passion economy. Maybe what we should do is build platforms to fuel people's passions, right? These micro-entrepreneurs, the ability to kind of do new things in new ways. And I love this description. I love this idea of software stack, right? Going from on-demand platforms that commoditize providers to marketplaces that emphasize the individuality of providers and SaaS tools that enable providers to run their own businesses. I think that's what we're seeing is this emergence of micro-entrepreneurs globally that can go do things in a new way that are really powerful. But back to the passion desert. I was still, if we look at it, there's passion economy, there's entrepreneurs, they're doing really cool stuff. But these big organizations, they're still passion deserts. And I really wanted to work at Harvard trying to figure out what that is and how do we overcome that. Because we know when we've implemented these tools, right, we know that from our research that these new tools work, these future of work tools work. We've created processes to implement those inside companies, and they seem to be starting to catch on. But yet there's something happening. There's a lubricant. There's a piece missing in this. So this is something that I've been really passionate and curious about. And recently I ran across this book called Passion for Work. It's a brand new book from Oxford. And one of the things that blows me away, maybe it's just me being an entrepreneur, but this is not a very well-studied area. The idea of passion and work inside big companies is something brand new. So this really is a compendium of a bunch of the newest and latest research that's out there. One of the things that talks to is this new model of emerging of the dual model of passion. And we've talked about passion to a lot of executives inside big companies, especially HR executives. They're scared half to death. In fact, they admit that they want to squeeze the passion out. Let's get the crazies out of here, right? We've got really big things to do. So contemplating that, I think one of the things that's important and this model points to is this idea that maybe we need to think about passion in a different way, in a more open way. So first, and I think most HR folks would think about passion is this. Who knows who this is? Alex Honnold, right? In a movie called Free Solo. A friend of mine, Jimmy Chin, shot this, and I've known Alex since he was a young kid. I would never want to be on a team with Alex, right? He's a scary dude. He's awesome, right? His passion is amazing. He's super inspiring, but the idea of soloing El Cap is just such a frightening thing, I think, for any human being. So contrast that. This is Conrad Anker. Who's heard of Conrad Anker? There was a movie, Meru. He's a climber. Conrad and I have known each other for a long time. One of the things I love about Conrad is the guy that you get on your team because he's the senior statesman. He's super stoked. He's passionate. He'll help you get to his goal or to your goal, but he'll never leave anybody behind, right? He's always with you and always making sure that the whole team gets up the mountain and down the mountain. So that's kind of the passion that I'm talking about today, the passion to kind of maybe fertilize the passion desert. Love this quote. Harmonious passions are defined as high quality or high priority goals with emotionally important outcomes. I think that's really it, right? At this balance of being really passionate, but then also being able to accomplish things. And one of the things that the research pointed to that really interested me was this idea that teams that have harmonious passion exhibit these 4 attributes: intrinsic motivation, transformational leadership, clan organizational behavior, and task autonomy. When I read this, I thought, man, that's like, who doesn't want this in their organization, right? Like, wouldn't it be cool that every organization had these 4 attributes, or could at least infuse these attributes, even if it's a passion desert? One of the things I've been into for a long time is this idea of diffusion curves. And, you know, being an entrepreneur, I've always felt like the innovator, right? I always felt like I had to have the Molotov cocktail and throw it against the walls of the incumbents just to even get noticed, right? And I think those of us that have been in this open space for a long time have felt that way. In the last couple of years, there have been some great thought leaders that are early adopters that have come along, like guys like Paul Estes that do an amazing job of communicating the need for open talent inside larger organizations, and that's really happening. Yet, in the classic Jeffrey Moore way, there's this kind of, gap, right? The early majority and late majority and laggards are all folks that are inside big organizations that are compliantly oriented, that are worried about IP, that are risk adverse. And there's this chasm, and I've been questioning, like, how do we kind of cross that? That's what we are, right at the beginning of the chasm. I think if you put it in the framework of passion, there's some interesting things that happen, right? If the left side is passion economy, if it's as crazy as the innovators, the early adopters, the people that are thrive in kind of chaos, and guys like you, folks like you, that just really love the startup idea, and then there are these passion deserts over here, maybe that's just, the passion gap, right? Maybe one of the things we need to help big companies do is infuse passion back into their companies. And one of the things that I've found is maybe open talent is the best and easiest way to cross that passion gap, right? I mean, it's a way to introduce new and interesting adjacent ideas into an organization without changing the structure of the organization. It's ways to kind of be blown away by the hairy, crazy entrepreneurial ideas that don't get to be infused, but yet protect the way you do business as it is. And maybe you can just start watering that passion desert in just a little way. That's my hope, at least, and some of the work that we're going to be doing as we go forward at Harvard. So I'm still in that learn phase and really, really excited to kind of continue the work at Lish and figure out how do we implement these things and how do we diffuse them across the network. The second step that I always think is important is experiment. Start playing, how do you build stuff? So before I started Open Assembly, the name of the company was Speakeasy. And I thought, well, maybe what I'll do is take the technology I built at Victors and Spoils and just make that the core of a company. Speakeasy Guild was the name of the company. Unfortunately, the advertising community wasn't ready for that kind of open tool. So we've pivoted, and essentially Open Assembly is kind of the commercial side of the lab. We help companies by building a community called The Collective. It's Open Assembly. That's our goal. Our goal is to be the rising tide that floats all boats. I'm super passionate about this, and I've been doing it for a long, long time, and this is kind of what I want to see, and I feel like that's my goal. So at Open Assembly, our focus is that we focus on a community called The Collective, that we do consulting, and then we create content around future of work. How do we help people make future of work and open talent just more ordinary and boring and simple? Make it more useful. We also do a lot of research. So we do a regular research report on co-creating the future of work. How do companies go about adopting this? I think that what you see, instead of most technologies in future of work that we've seen or in the world, this kind of future of work B2B space is very interesting because instead of having one winner, there are 850 platforms globally. So lots to work out. While there's a big opportunity, there's also a big need to get everybody aligned and make sure we're focused on the right things. So 3 is build. I think that's an important part, but you can't really start building, right, until you're finished experimenting. And I'm so inspired by what Tony and freelance guys are doing, right? The Aero Plus on-demand platform is something really interesting. I think it's a great example of what's possible with an organization that kind of decides to think about the world in a different way. I love this. I love the idea of Aero providing a technical concierge and project management to a vast network of high-end engineering talent. I think that's just the reality, right? The reality of the future is the world is going way too fast for any of us to do things in a static, in-house way that have happened in the past. So then the last thing, and I think this is a phase that we're all going to be in for a long time once we go through the learn, experiment, build, is the master phase. I think I'm just starting to think about that. Even though I've been doing this work for 20-some years, I feel like that's my goal for the next 10 years, is how do we master this? How do we master the skills of not only what are the open platforms, but what are the tools that we can help the companies adopt and adapt to this new world of work? And how do we make that humane? I think there's a lot of talk out there in the open talent world that maybe the gig economy isn't fair to workers. Maybe there are some issues that are socioeconomic. And I think those are super important things that we all have to figure out, right? That's really, really important. It's got to be a high tide floats all boats in this marketplace. We've got to make sure that everybody can go forward together. But I think that starts with this idea of reframing disruption. You know, for a long time, especially in the last few years, I've still been a little bit rattled by this idea of an avalanche, right? Just kind of a cat on a hot tin roof, just waiting for the next disruption to happen. Is somebody going to get sick? I'm going to get a call from a big client to not do work with me. It can be kind of a scary thing. And I think the key is reframing that disruption, right? The key is to get yourself in a place as an entrepreneur working in the future of work area to think about things just in a little bit different space. And so I would propose thinking about avalanches in a new way, right? From an avalanche to a wave. The idea that a wave, especially big waves, and I don't know if you've seen the news lately, but there's a wave in Portugal called Nazaré, and Nazaré is going off right now with 100-foot waves, which are essentially, aquatic avalanches. But the amazing thing about waves, I love to surf, and the thing I love about surfing is you have this tool, you have this skill. This avalanche is coming, you can see these black lines way out to sea, and it's really, really scary. The same feeling as an avalanche when it starts. But yet you have this board, you can ride it. And the coolest thing about a wave is that you find yourself on the wave at the right time, at the right place, and there's this sweet spot. You can feel the energy. It just becomes this magical place, right? There's this spot. You can figure out where it is because you've got the tools to do it, to just be right in the right place. So I would encourage everybody to really lean into that, right? May all of your most difficult disruptions become beautiful waves, waiting to carry your passions into a new reality. So as you go forward today and tomorrow in this conference, look at it from the perspective of how do I reframe, disruption, and how do I think about what I'm really passionate about, and how do I take away something that's really a nugget that I can grow from? How do I go through that idea of being here at StartCon and learning, right? And going back and then starting to experiment some of the things you really learned by connecting with people and seeing new things. And then find a way to build something new, right? Interesting and powerful, but also really useful and ordinary and boring. And then, once you find that thing, really focus on mastering that skill and making it perfect, really refining it so that it's really yours, but it satisfies the needs of the marketplace and your customers. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate this. It's an honor to be here, and I hope you guys have a great conference.